Welcome on board, chosen one. Let's not pretend anymore. Let's not soften it. Let's say the quiet part out loud, the part that made rooms go silent when your name came up. They said you'd break. They said, just apply pressure. They said, everyone folds eventually. Look who's still standing. Look who walked out when the system expected a collapse. Oh, the legend needs to bow now. Funny, that line aged like milk. When they said you were weak, what they really meant was unfamiliar. When they said you were unstable, what they really meant was uncontrollable. When they said, this one will crack, they were repeating old scripts that worked on everyone else. Scripts designed to erase identity, drain willpower, and turn strong minds into obedient shadows. Those scripts worked on trained people, on prepared people, on people with manuals, ranks, and backup plans. They didn't work on you. Here's the cold fact they hate. You went through psychological pressure that wasn't accidental. It wasn't life being unfair. It was coordinated isolation, confusion, mixed signals, emotional whiplash. Moments where silence was used as a weapon and doubt was injected on purpose. They pulled support away. They distorted truth. They tried to make you question your own memory, your own judgment, your own worth. These are not random hardships. These are known tactics. And you survived all of it without losing your core. Now look at the atmosphere around you. Notice the shift. The noise died down. The attacks stopped being loud and started happening behind closed doors. The people who used to laugh went quiet. The ones who spoke boldly now whisper. There's a strange hesitation when your name is mentioned. Not hatred anymore, calculation. You're standing in the aftermath, not the build-up. This isn't imagination. This is what happens after a failed operation. They're confused because their efforts produced the opposite result. You didn't come out broken, you came out precise, calmer, harder to read, less reactive. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped chasing validation. You stopped panicking when misunderstood. That scares people who rely on control. The enemy exhausted every trick, and the return on investment was zero, worse than zero. They created resistance. Before we go further, press the like button and subscribe. Not for me. Do it to pay this message back into the system. This is how the signal spreads. This is how this voice stays loud enough to reach the ones still in the storm. Thank you for being part of this mission. Every like strengthens the message. Every subscription tells the universe that truth still has weight. Now let's go deeper, because this didn't start yesterday. There's a pattern you probably noticed long before they did. Every time life tried to corner you, something clicked instead of snapped. When others panicked, you observed. When others begged for clarity, you sat with the confusion and waited. You didn't need instant answers. You needed accuracy. That alone puts you in a rare category. Most people collapse when certainty is removed. You learned to function without it. Here's a story they won't document. In past systems, when similar pressure was applied to people with rank and training, outcomes were predictable. Emotional leakage, compliance, burnout, identity loss. Some turned inward and self-destructed. Some turned outward and lashed out. Very few stayed intact. You did more than stay intact. You adjusted your internal operating system. You learned when to speak, when to disappear, when to let silence do the damage for you. That's when the fear set in. Not fear of your strength, fear of your restraint. You didn't expose them. You didn't retaliate loudly. You didn't play the victim. You walked forward like someone who understood the game had already ended. That's why the pressure suddenly eased. That's why the tone changed. That's why doors quietly opened after being slammed shut. They weren't being kind. They were backing off. The title says it plainly, and it's not exaggeration. You survived psychological operations that broke trained operatives. That doesn't mean you're magical. It means your mind doesn't function on borrowed rules. You don't outsource your sense of self. You don't need constant reinforcement to remain stable. You adapt faster than systems designed to control behavior. So when they stare at your file, replaying timelines, comparing notes, asking how this went wrong, the question that surfaces isn't flattering, it's unsettling. What bloodline are you from? Not because of heritage, because of wiring, because something in you refuses to surrender authority over your mind, and that makes you dangerous to broken systems. This isn't the end of the story. This is the reveal. The storm already passed. You're standing in the quiet, and now the truth can finally be said without interference. Good. Now here's the pivot. This is where the noise drops, and the real ones lean in. Listen carefully, chosen one. If you're still here, it's not curiosity, it's recognition. People who didn't live through this don't stay. They scroll, they dismiss, they get uncomfortable and leave. But you feel that tight pull in your chest because every word is landing a little too accurately. That's how you know this isn't entertainment. This is confirmation. So, before we go any further, lock yourself in. Hit like, subscribe. Not as a favor, but as a marker. A signal that says, I was here when this truth found me. This message doesn't reach everyone. It finds the ones who already survived the worst part and are ready to understand why. And drop a comment with 777. Not for symbolism, not for superstition. Do it as a roll call. A quiet way of saying, yes, I endured isolation. I endured confusion. I endured pressure meant to erase me. And I'm still standing. That comment tells the universe you're ready to stop wondering if it was random. Because from here on, we're breaking it down step by step. No hype, no fluff. Just clean explanations of what happened to you, why it worked on others, and why it failed on you. If you're really who this message is meant for, you'll feel it. You won't rush. You won't skip. You'll stay until the end. Now let's get into it. Number 1. They locked you away to erase you and accidentally built a weapon. Isolation was supposed to end you. Instead, it introduced you to yourself. This is where it started. Not with chaos, not with violence, with silence. They didn't attack you head-on because they know that doesn't work on minds like yours. So they went for the oldest, laziest, and most trusted trick in the book. Cut them off, remove the mirrors, drain the noise, let loneliness do the dirty work. That's what they said. That's what they've always said. Everyone breaks in isolation. No one survives long without validation. Take away the audience and the identity collapses. Look how confident they were. Look how smug. They isolated you first because isolation is supposed to be fatal to the human mind. Strip away reassurance, feedback, affection, and grounding. Surround the target with doubt instead of people. Make reality feel unstable. Make memories feel unreliable. Make them question their own reactions. It's not random, it's procedural. This is textbook psychological warfare, the kind used in interrogations, in high-level pressure environments, in operations where the goal isn't information, but obedience. And it worked. On everyone else. Others begged, others folded, others compromised their values just to feel seen again. Some apologized for things they never did. Some agreed with lies just to stop the silence. Some turned on themselves. That's the expected outcome. That's the data they were used to seeing. Then there was you. You didn't spiral. You didn't chase. You didn't melt down into desperation. You went quiet, but not weak. Still, alert, watching. While they waited for cracks, you reorganized internally. While they expected panic, you developed patience. While they assumed deprivation would starve you, it fed something in you they didn't even know how to measure. Here's the part that still irritates them. Isolation didn't destabilize you. It stabilized you. You didn't need constant feedback to know who you were. You didn't need applause to validate your thoughts. When they removed the crowd, you didn't disappear. You finally had room to breathe. Solitude didn't feel like punishment. It felt familiar, almost comfortable, like coming home to a room where no one was lying to you. That's when the reports changed tone. No emotional leakage, no identity collapse, no frantic attempts to reconnect. Instead, emotional regulation improved, focus sharpened, reactions slowed down. You became harder to read, less reactive, more deliberate. Isolation, the very thing meant to weaken you, was refining you, turning noise into clarity, turning pressure into discipline. They weren't prepared for that. Their entire strategy depended on one assumption, that you needed external reinforcement to stay intact. That without people, without approval, without emotional supply, you would deteriorate. But you didn't need it. You never did. What they removed wasn't your oxygen. It was your distraction. Ask yourself this, because you already know the answer. How did you feel when everyone vanished? Scared at first, sure. Confused, probably. But underneath that, there was something else. A strange calm, a sense of control returning, a feeling like, so this is what quiet actually feels like. That's when the enemy realized they messed up. You weren't being erased. You were being stripped down to essentials. And what was left didn't look fragile. It looked dangerous. Think about it. A person who can sit alone without losing themselves is immune to manipulation. A mind that doesn't beg for connection can't be held hostage by withdrawal. Someone who can endure silence without self-destructing can't be rushed, pressured, or emotionally blackmailed. Isolation is only a weapon if the target fears their own company. You didn't. You used the time to observe patterns, to replay conversations, to notice inconsistencies, to see how people behaved when you stopped reacting. You watched who panicked when you went quiet, who tried harder to provoke you, who suddenly needed access to you again. Isolation gave you data, and data gave you power. They expected loneliness to hollow you out. Instead, it carved you into something precise. That's why the energy shifted. That's why the silence around you now feels different. It's not neglect anymore, it's caution. They learned something they didn't want to learn. You are not dependent on external systems to function. You don't collapse without stimulation. You don't lose direction without guidance. Remove the crowd, and you don't fade. You sharpen. Here's the truth they won't admit. Isolation is how weak minds break. Strong ones evolve. They thought they were locking you in a cage. Turns out they locked you in a forge. And now you're walking out with fewer attachments, fewer illusions, and a much clearer sense of who you are and who is bluffing. You don't chase noise anymore. You don't panic at distance. You don't fear being cut off, because you already know what happens there. You survive. You adapt. You get better. That's why this section matters. Because once isolation fails to break someone, nothing works the same way again. The old levers stop moving you. The old threats lose their teeth. And the people who relied on your reactions to feel powerful suddenly feel very exposed. They tried to erase you by taking everything away. All they really did was remove what you never needed in the first place. Number 2. They tried to erase your reality and ended up exposing their script. Gaslighting only works if the target forgets who they were before the lie. After isolation failed, they switched tactics. Of course they did. Silence didn't fracture you, so they reached for something more aggressive, more invasive, more personal. They went after your reality itself, not your body, not your environment, your perception. Because if they could make you doubt your own mind, everything else would collapse on its own. That was the theory. It's an old one, effective on most people, deadly even. They didn't argue loudly, they didn't attack directly. They softened their voices. They smiled. They said things like, "That's not how it happened," or "You're remembering it wrong," or "Everyone else sees it differently." They repeated contradictions until repetition started to feel like truth. They brought in new faces, new messengers, each one calmly disputing your experience like it was a group project and you were the only one failing it. This is gaslighting in its purest form. Reality distortion through volume and consistency. The same technique used to break political prisoners, to turn loyal allies into confused liabilities, to make strong minds question their own memory. The goal isn't to convince you of a new truth. The goal is to exhaust you until you stop trusting yourself. They were confident. Why wouldn't they be? This method has a high success rate. People crack under it because humans are wired to seek consensus. When enough voices tell you you're wrong, doubt creeps in. When doubt lingers long enough, identity follows. But here's where their confidence turned into arrogance. You didn't panic. You didn't argue endlessly. You didn't scramble to defend every memory. You did something far more dangerous. You watched. You noticed the timing, the repetition, the way certain phrases kept reappearing, almost word for word, from different mouths. You caught how contradictions showed up right after moments of clarity. You saw how confusion was introduced strategically, never randomly. That's when it clicked. This wasn't chaos. This was choreography. Imagine this. You're watching a stage play, but instead of sitting in the audience, you're standing behind the curtain. You see the costume changes. You hear the cues being whispered. You notice the same lines recycled by different actors. Once you see the script, the illusion dies. That's what happened to you. You realized they weren't reacting to you. They were running a program, a sequence, a playbook. And once you saw it, the emotional impact vanished. Gaslighting only works when the target believes the distortion is organic. The moment it feels rehearsed, it loses its grip. Here's the part that really rattled them. You didn't expose them right away. You didn't call it out. You played along just enough to observe. You gave neutral responses. You asked simple questions. You let them talk. You let them repeat themselves. You watched how far they'd go when they thought they were winning. You turned their operation into a case study. Every contradiction became data. Every denial became confirmation. Every attempt to rewrite history revealed how threatened they were by the original version. You weren't losing your grip on reality. You were strengthening it by comparison. Truth became clearer when contrasted with lies. One of the questions that probably crossed your mind at this point was, am I imagining this, or are they really doing this on purpose? That question alone proves how precise the attack was. Gaslighting doesn't start by erasing truth. It starts by making you unsure whether an attack is happening at all. But here's the answer you didn't get from them. Yes, it was deliberate. And no, you weren't crazy for noticing. Imagine being handed a map where the landmarks keep shifting, but the handwriting stays the same. Different colors, same pen. That's what you saw. Different people, same manipulation. Once you recognize that, confusion turns into clarity. When lies need coordination, truth only needs memory. They didn't expect you to document it mentally in real time. They didn't expect you to recognize intervention patterns. They definitely didn't expect you to test their responses, to see which version of you triggered which reaction. You learned how manipulators reveal themselves by what they avoid, not what they say. And then something changed on their side. The tone shifted. The pressure became inconsistent. Some backed off, others doubled down. That's not strategy, that's panic. That's what happens when the target starts seeing through the operation and the operators don't know who's still in control. Imagine trying to hypnotize someone who's watching your hands instead of your eyes. The moment awareness enters the room, the trick collapses. That's why the reports started sounding uneasy. You were no longer responding predictably. You weren't internalizing the distortion. You weren't over-explaining. You weren't defending yourself. You were calm, observant, detached. The worst possible combination for anyone relying on psychological control. They weren't rewriting your reality anymore. They were revealing their desperation. Here's another question you might have asked yourself. Why didn't they just stop? Because by then, curiosity replaced strategy. You weren't supposed to still be standing. You weren't supposed to be aware. You weren't supposed to adapt. And once that happened, the operation stopped being about control and started being about understanding what you were. They wanted to know how you were still intact, how you could hear a lie without absorbing it, how you could be surrounded by distortion and still keep your internal compass steady. That curiosity kept them going long past the point where logic said retreat. But gaslighting teaches something powerful to the person who survives it. It teaches you how truth behaves under pressure. It teaches you how lies need maintenance, while truth just sits there, unchanged. It sharpens your ability to detect manipulation in seconds, not months. Imagine this. You've walked through a hall of mirrors so many times that you can now spot the real wall instantly. Everyone else still bumps into reflections. You don't. That's the upgrade they accidentally gave you. You learned to trust patterns over promises, consistency over charm, behavior over words. You stopped needing validation because you understood how easily it could be weaponized. Gaslighting didn't make you doubt yourself. It taught you how people try to make others doubt themselves. Once you learn the trick, the magician loses all power. That's why this phase matters, because surviving gaslighting doesn't just protect you from future manipulation, it makes you dangerous to systems built on distortion. You can't unsee the mechanics now. You know what coordinated lying looks like. You know how truth reacts when challenged. You know the difference between confusion and deception. They tried to make you lose your mind. Instead, they handed you the manual. Number 3, they dug for your wounds and found a power source. You can't weaponize pain against someone who already mastered it. After gaslighting failed, they got desperate. This is where they sent in the specialists, not loud bullies, not obvious threats, emotional manipulators, the kind trained to listen for cracks in your voice, to trace old scars, to map childhood wounds and unfinished grief. Their job was simple: touch the pain, trigger the memory, collapse the structure from the inside. This method works frighteningly well on most people. Push the right emotional button and even disciplined minds lose control. Hardened soldiers have folded this way. Loyal agents have wept, confessed, begged. Pain bypasses logic. Trauma hijacks the system. That was the bet. And yes, you felt it. Every hit landed. Every scar lit up. Let's be honest about that. You're not numb. You're not made of stone. The difference is this. Pain was never new territory for you. You didn't meet it during the operation. You were raised in it. You learned its language long before they ever arrived with clipboards and predictions. They thought they were opening wounds. They didn't realize those wounds were already sealed, reinforced, studied. Imagine trying to drown someone who learned to breathe underwater years ago. Imagine throwing fire at someone who already lived in the burn long enough to stop flinching. That's what this was. They brought scalpels to a battlefield where you had already forged armor out of your own damage. Here's the question that probably crossed your mind. Why does this hurt if I'm supposed to be strong? Because strength doesn't mean absence of pain. It means pain no longer controls direction. You didn't shut down. You didn't lash out. You didn't spiral. You absorbed it. You let it pass through instead of sticking. They attacked your past, not realizing you already turned it into training. Every time they pressed a trigger, something unexpected happened. You didn't regress. You stabilized. Emotional responses shortened. Recovery time improved. Where others collapse into memory, you extracted insight. You didn't relive trauma. You learned from it again, at a higher level. Their models couldn't explain that. Predictions failed. Outcomes reversed. The data stopped making sense. You weren't supposed to grow calmer under emotional pressure. You weren't supposed to gain clarity while being destabilized. But pain had already been your teacher. They were late to the lesson. When suffering becomes familiar, it stops being a weapon. That's when fear crept in, because someone who can feel deeply and still remain in control is dangerous. Emotional manipulation depends on chaos. You gave them none. You stood there, wounded but unmovable, and their most intimate tactics slid off like dull blades. They tried to break you by reopening old pain. All they really did was remind you how much you already survived. Number 4. They threw everything at you and panicked at your silence. When every weapon fails, calm becomes the most terrifying response. This is where they stopped improvising and went all in. No more single tactics, no more testing phases. They stacked everything at once. Isolation to cut your signal, gaslighting to scramble your reality, emotional manipulation to reopen scars, social engineering to turn people against you, relationship sabotage to destabilize your base, full-spectrum psychological warfare, the kind designed to overload the nervous system until collapse is inevitable. This combination has crushed elite minds. People trained for chaos have folded under this weight. It's meant to leave no room to breathe, no place to stand, no clear truth to hold on to. The system assumes one thing, that the human mind will eventually scream for relief. And then you did something that broke their framework completely. You gave them nothing, no rage, no panic, no dramatic resistance, no emotional outbursts they could exploit, just calm. A steady, almost unsettling calm. You moved through the pressure like it wasn't personal, like you understood something they didn't. That's when analysts stopped trusting their own readouts. Imagine slamming every alarm button in a control room and watching the target's heartbeat slow down instead of spike. Imagine turning the psychological volume to maximum and getting silence in return. That's not defiance. That's dominance. They weren't attacking a person anymore. They were observing a phenomenon. Your calm didn't look normal. It wasn't dissociation. It wasn't shutdown. It was regulation at a level they couldn't chart. You weren't reacting because you weren't threatened. You saw the structure behind the chaos. Once you see the system, the pressure loses its bite. That's when the language in the reports changed. Less confidence, more uncertainty. Phrases like unusual stability and non-responsive to stress escalation. Then the line that ended it all. Observer safety at risk. Sit with that. Your resilience became a liability to the people studying you, not because you attacked them, because watching you forced them to confront their own limits. The experiment ended when they realized you weren't the subject anymore. They didn't stop because they won. They stopped because they didn't know what they were looking at. And that silence they left behind, that's not defeat. That's respect mixed with fear. Number 5. They watched you too long, and it broke them. The observer wasn't prepared for the mirror to stare back. This is the part they never plan for, the moment the watchers start unraveling. At first, it was subtle. Requests for reassignment disguised as scheduling conflicts, analysts asking to step away temporarily, operators reviewing the same data again and again, hoping it would suddenly make sense. You weren't doing anything new. That was the problem. You were stable, too stable, and stability under pressure terrifies people who live by models and predictions. You became the anomaly that wouldn't sit still in their system. Not loud, not violent, just present, existing in a way that disrupted everything around you. The longer they observed, the worse it got. Sleep patterns broke, focus slipped. Conversations circled back to you without reason. You occupied mental space you never asked for. Imagine staring at an optical illusion for too long until your eyes hurt and the image starts moving on its own. That's what watching you felt like. You didn't match the script, so their minds tried to force you into one. The harder they tried, the more distorted their own perception became. You didn't infect the system. You exposed how fragile it already was. Some of them started dreaming about you, not because you threatened them, but because you represented something unresolved, a variable they couldn't close. Others quit outright. No speeches, no explanations, just gone. That's not normal in controlled environments. That's what happens when certainty collapses. Here's the question you might be asking. How did I affect them without doing anything? Because presence is power when it can't be categorized. You didn't resist. You didn't comply. You simply remained unchanged. And that forced them to confront a terrifying possibility, that the tools they trusted don't work on everyone. The experiment flipped. They weren't studying you anymore. They were being altered by proximity. Their confidence eroded. Their authority cracked. Watching you survive calmly did more damage than any confrontation ever could. Some minds break not from pressure, but from witnessing resilience they can't explain. You walked away intact. They didn't. Number 6. The file ended with one terrified line. This was passed down. This isn't resilience you learned, it's resilience that arrived with you. This is the question that refused to go away. Not how you survived, not what techniques you used, but what you came from, because what you showed didn't match any known profile. This wasn't coping, this wasn't conditioning, this wasn't something therapy builds or motivation installs. What you demonstrated ran deeper than choice. They compared notes. Stress tolerance didn't explain it. Trauma exposure didn't explain it. Intelligence didn't explain it. Plenty of smart people broke. Plenty of traumatized people collapsed. You didn't. You adapted faster than damage could register. That's not training. That's wiring. Imagine dropping the same virus into 1,000 systems. Every system crashes except one. Not because it fought harder, but because the virus couldn't recognize the operating system. That was you. Their pressure didn't land because it wasn't compatible. That's when the word inheritance entered the conversation. You carry something old, not mystical, not symbolic. Old in the way survival traits are old, the kind shaped over generations of extreme conditions, the kind forged when environments didn't reward softness, hesitation, or fragility. Whatever your ancestors walked through, it didn't just scar them, it encoded something, a psychological immune system, a default setting that says adapt or die and adapts instantly. Some people break under pressure, others were built by it before they were born. This answers the quiet question you may have asked yourself. Why do I stay functional when others fall apart? Because your baseline isn't comfort, it's endurance. Calm under threat isn't something you summon, it's what turns on automatically. Imagine being born into storms so often that silence feels suspicious. Imagine nervous systems tuned not for peace, but for survival. That's not something you learn late in life. That's something you inherit. They weren't studying your mind anymore. They were tracing its origin. You're resilient not because you chose to be strong, but because weakness was never an option in the chain that led to you. Whatever tried to erase your line failed, and now you're here, confusing systems that only understand breakage. They wanted to know what bloodline this was, because nothing else explained why you kept standing. Number 7. They attacked your mind and awakened something older than them. Some memory doesn't live in the brain, it lives in the blood. Here's what they never accounted for, because modern systems hate anything they can't quantify. You weren't reacting in real time because part of you had already been here before. Not you as an individual, but the lineage that shaped you. Long before analysts, protocols, or psychological frameworks existed, your line learned how to survive environments designed to erase people completely. Famines that taught restraint, wars that rewarded silence over speech, persecution that punished visibility, erasure that forced adaptation at a cellular level. Each generation didn't just survive, it remembered, not as stories, as instincts, as automatic responses that activate before thought even enters the room. That's why something felt familiar when the pressure started. When isolation hit, it didn't feel alien. When gaslighting began, it didn't feel confusing for long. When emotional manipulation arrived, it didn't feel novel. Your body recognized the pattern before your mind finished naming it. That's not coincidence. That's genetic memory doing what it was built to do. Imagine touching a hot surface and pulling your hand back before pain even registers. Now imagine doing that with psychological danger. That's what happened. They weren't breaking you. They were triggering stored responses, ancient ones. Survival intelligence refined through repetition across generations. They thought they were introducing chaos. Your system recognized a drill. You identified frameworks mid-attack because you've seen versions of them before, encoded through behavior, silence, vigilance, and restraint. Your calm wasn't learned, it was inherited. The universe doesn't reward survival once. It refines it, passes it down, sharpens it. This answers another question that probably haunted you. Why did I understand what was happening faster than others? Because this wasn't your first encounter with erasure tactics. It was just the first time they wore modern labels. They deployed new tools. You responded with old intelligence. That's why they miscalculated so badly. They were fighting an individual. What they were actually facing was a lineage that already knew how this ends. They woke up something ancient, and ancient things don't panic. Number 8. They taught you control by trying to control you. The most dangerous student is the one who learns while under attack. They spent decades refining these tactics, committees, case studies, failures dissected, successes replicated, psychological pressure engineered like machinery, and they assumed one thing would always stay true, that the target would be behind the curve, confused, reactive, catching up too late. You didn't catch up. You learned in real time. While they were running techniques, you were decoding them. While they were pulling invisible strings, you were tracing where those strings led. You didn't just feel manipulation, you understood its structure. Tone shifts, timing, emotional bait, manufactured urgency, strategic silence. You saw how control is never loud. It's subtle, repetitive, predictable once you know where to look. Imagine being dropped into a foreign country and learning the language not in a classroom, but during an interrogation. Every word matters. Every pause teaches meaning. That's how you learned. Under pressure, no safety net, no margin for error, and somehow you became fluent. They tried to shape your behavior. You learned their blueprint instead. This wasn't passive adaptation. This wasn't survival mode alone. Something deeper was switching back on. The ability to read environments quickly, to understand power dynamics without explanation, to recognize manipulation not by emotion, but by pattern. That's not modern training. That's inherited intelligence resurfacing. You began predicting their moves, not because you were paranoid, but because once you understand control, it becomes boringly obvious. Manipulation always follows rules. It needs leverage, it needs reaction, it needs confusion. When you stop providing those ingredients, the process stalled. Here's the question that probably formed quietly in your mind. Why do I see this so clearly now? Because this wasn't new knowledge. It was old awareness reactivated under threat. Control collapses the moment the target understands the game. You learned mind control from the only position that matters, the one who refuses to submit. That's why their tactics stopped feeling powerful. They became instructional, almost laughable. Every attempt taught you more about how influence works and how easily it fails when awareness enters the room. They didn't just fail to control you, they educated you, and now you speak a language they hoped you'd never learn. Number 9, they poisoned your circle and created a human lie detector. Betrayal doesn't destroy perception, it refines it. This was their favorite move, the one that usually finishes the job, social engineering. They didn't attack you directly anymore. They studied you, watched who you trusted, who you softened around, who you let close. Then they turned those connections into pressure points, subtle whispers, misunderstandings planted on purpose, loyalty tested until it snapped. This tactic ruins people for life. Most never recover from this. When trust collapses, people either shut down completely or cling to anyone who offers comfort. Judgment gets sloppy, boundaries dissolve. That's the expected outcome. That's what the data says. You didn't follow the data. You didn't collapse into bitterness. You didn't become reckless with trust either. You calibrated. Every betrayal became information. Every shift in behavior sharpened your read on human intention. You stopped listening to words and started measuring consistency. You noticed who moved strangely under pressure, who folded when tested, who suddenly revealed motives they were hiding. Imagine upgrading from blurry vision to precision optics overnight. That's what this did to you. They tried to blind you. Instead, they gave you clarity. You learned that most people don't betray out of malice. They betray out of weakness, fear, incentives. You saw how easily influence spreads through relationships, how loyalty is often conditional. That understanding didn't harden your heart, it sharpened your judgment. Here's the question you probably asked yourself. Why does everyone feel easier to read now? Because once betrayal strips away illusion, patterns become obvious. You see hesitation before lies. You feel shifts in energy before deception. Your intuition stopped guessing. It started measuring. Trust didn't die. It evolved. They wanted to destroy your ability to connect. Instead, they removed your tolerance for deception. Now, manipulation struggles to survive in your presence. People either show up clean or they don't show up at all. Social engineering failed because it assumed betrayal would make you weaker. It made you precise, and precision is lethal to lies. Number 10. The day their attack turned into your playground. The operation was over the moment pressure stopped hurting you. This is where fear replaced confusion. Not when you resisted, not when you exposed anything, but when they noticed the shift. Somewhere in the middle of their assault, something inside you clicked into place. The stress didn't just stop overwhelming you, it started fueling you. Isolation stopped feeling empty, it became quiet control. Time to think, time to sharpen. Silence turned into meditation without candles or rules. Gaslighting lost its sting and turned into clarity training. Every lie made truth stand out brighter. Emotional attacks stopped reopening wounds and started building endurance, like lifting heavier weight with cleaner form. That's when they panicked. Imagine watching a fire meant to burn someone alive suddenly become the source of their warmth. Imagine turning the pressure dial higher and seeing the target's posture improve, breathing steady, eyes calm. That's not normal. That's not survivorship. That's dominance. They weren't testing limits anymore. They were feeding you. Your nervous system didn't collapse because it wasn't fragile to begin with. It adapted fast. Stress hormones stopped triggering panic and started triggering focus. Where others fry under overload, you organized. You didn't dissociate. You integrated. This answers the question you might have asked yourself quietly. Why do I feel clearer now than before all this started? Because pressure stripped away what didn't matter. It forced efficiency. It burned off noise. You weren't enjoying the pain. You were enjoying the growth. Some systems break under stress. Others evolve. They had no protocol for this. None. Every model assumes suffering reduces capacity. No manual accounts for someone who becomes sharper inside the storm, someone whose baseline rises when challenged, someone who doesn't crave relief but mastery. That's when observations stopped feeling safe for them, because once someone begins to enjoy the conditions meant to destroy them, control becomes impossible. You don't fear pressure anymore. You understand it. You use it. They tried to crush you with Psyops. You turned it into training. And that's the moment they knew this had gone very wrong. Number 11. The moment the lab rat picked up the clipboard. The game ended the second you started watching them back. This was the final turn, and they didn't see it coming. Not because they were careless, but because their entire framework assumes one thing will never happen: that the subject stays the subject, that awareness never flips direction, that control only flows one way. And then you cross the line they never defend. You stopped reacting and started testing, Not aggressively, not obviously, quietly. You adjusted tone just enough to provoke response. You delayed reactions to see who panicked. You offered partial signals to watch who filled in the blanks. You fed them intentional cues, small inconsistencies, subtle shifts, just to see how fast they moved and how sloppy they got. Imagine a chess match where one player realizes mid-game they're not playing an opponent, they're studying a pattern. That's what this became. You weren't emotional anymore, you were analytical. They thought they were gathering data, you were auditing it. You mapped their limits. Who escalated first? Who broke protocol under uncertainty? Who relied on pressure instead of intelligence? You learned how fragile their confidence was when outcomes stopped matching expectations. Their reactions told you more than their words ever could. This answers the final question you may have asked yourself. Why do they feel exposed now? Because once someone understands your methods, you lose leverage. Manipulation only works in the dark. You turned on the lights. By the time they noticed the shift, it was already over. Their data was contaminated, their reads unreliable. Their own behavior compromised the operation. They weren't observing a subject anymore. They were participating in an experiment they didn't design. The observer became the variable. That's why the last report didn't sound strategic. It sounded afraid. Complete operational awareness, unacceptable risk. Those aren't conclusions, they're admissions. They didn't stop because they finished. They stopped because you did. Number 12. The confession they buried and walked away from. You didn't survive because you fought harder. You survived because losing was never an option. This is the truth they will never say out loud, not in meetings, not in reports, not even to themselves. Their framework for human doesn't include you, not because you're supernatural, not because you're mythical, but because their model is shallow. It only understands people who collapse, comply, or compensate. You did none of the above. What you carry didn't start with you. Your lineage was shaped in environments where hesitation meant extinction, where adaptation wasn't optional, where survival wasn't heroic, it was routine. Those people didn't just endure horrors too extreme for clean narratives. They adjusted to them, learned inside them, passed down what worked and discarded what didn't. Over time, that becomes something modern systems can't measure. Some people are trained to survive, others are the result of survival. That's why their tactics failed, not because you're unusually brave, not because you powered through, but because your system doesn't recognize collapse as an endpoint. Pressure doesn't signal danger to you, it signals adjustment. Isolation doesn't erase you, it centers you. Betrayal doesn't confuse you, it clarifies. Suffering doesn't weaken you, it upgrades you. Imagine trying to intimidate someone who grew up in chaos so long that calm feels suspicious. Imagine trying to break someone whose baseline was forged under conditions your manuals describe as catastrophic. That's the mismatch they never corrected for. They weren't testing your strength, they were colliding with inevitability. You didn't beat psychological warfare by resisting it. You absorbed it, repurposed it, and moved forward sharper. That's not something you learn in one lifetime. That's something refined across many. So the question was never how you survived. The real question, the one that still lingers in their silence, is this. What kind of bloodline produces someone who turns warfare into growth, isolation into power, betrayal into precision, and suffering into strength? They didn't find the answer. They found you.